Hey everyone, welcome back to Unlearn with Bianca. On this podcast, we talk about everything around self-healing, the mind-body connection, personal development, relationships, and more. So on today's episode, this is going to be a short and sweet one. I am going to answer a few questions. So I put a question box up on Instagram to see if anyone had any questions that they'd like me to answer around chronic illness, around mindset, around my own journey. And I got a few really good ones that I want to answer on here today. And a disclaimer before we get into it today, none of what I say today replaces medical advice. It's really just my opinion and just some words of wisdom that I hope you can extract what you need from whatever I say. So for context, just for anyone new tuning into this podcast, I am a mind-body practitioner. So that means that I work a lot with both the mind and the body and people that are stuck mentally and physically. A lot of my work is really around teaching people tools so that they can retrain their brain and bring their nervous system into more of a regulated state. So I am very much familiar with stuckness. I'm very much familiar with what it takes to change. And that is where some of these questions are going today. So let's get into it. So we're keeping these questions anonymous, but I've purposely selected some that I think everyone listening will be able to take something from. So number one, first question. And by the way, thank you to everyone who sent these. So the first question, this was by somebody who I hadn't worked with before. So I usually feel good, but I've been feeling stuck since the end of Feb. What do you think works to get out of a mental rut? I just don't know where to start. Okay, first of all, thank you so much for sending that question through, because I think all of us could agree that mental ruts are a part of life and they are part of being a human. So the first thing I would say is accept that that is where you're at and that is totally okay. We're going to have our moments, we're going to have our phases, and it's not really about avoiding the stuckness. It's not about avoiding or beating ourselves up when we're feeling stuck, but it's really about gaining some awareness and having some tools so that you don't feel like you're in these stuck points and these ruts for a long period of time. At the same time, I would say that you've already recognized that emotions are messages. And I think that's really great that you can even identify that, because so many of us are walking around not completely happy, not completely sad, but unaware that change could be possible. So first, I would say show yourself some compassion. Really know that it just takes some patience and you will come out the other side. So let's look at the word rut. So rut is quite a general word. And without knowing too much about how you're defining it and what it means for you, I mean, it could mean a few things. It could mean that you feel like you're self-sabotaging. It could be more of an unmotivating feeling, a tiredness, a sadness. So let's look at it a bit more and define it, because I think that will help you gain some more clarity. Because one thing I know from experience, from the ruts I have navigated in my life, is that the more that we can pinpoint what the emotion is that we're experiencing, the less it feels overwhelming. And then the more that we can take action without getting into this kind of paralysis analysis. So I really see the answer to this question about moving out of a rut, where to start, in three different parts. I'm going to go through all three separately, and I just want you to take what resonates. And of course, anyone else listening who feels in the same position, take what resonates, and just know that by focusing on one thing, doing one thing different, that you are heading in the right direction. We don't need to do everything all at once. I just want to give you some options. So the first part, I would argue the most important part when we are moving through stuckness, when we feel like we're moving through a rut, is look to see where you can up your self-care. Really just mastering the basics, making sure that you're getting enough sleep, because I know it sounds basic, but a lot of us do not prioritize sleep. So making sure that you're really getting your 7 to 8 hours sleep, exercising and moving your body when you can, even if it just means getting your steps in, getting enough to eat and eating really nourishing food, staying hydrated, getting into the sunlight. And one that is especially helpful for me if I'm feeling like this, get off your phone or spend less time on your phone, because oh my God, if I'm feeling in a rut, the first thing that I aim to do is get off my phone and stop that mindless scrolling. Because if we are feeling stuck and we're on our phone and we're looking at what everyone else is doing, the lives of everyone else, it just heightens things. Definitely look at your digital habits. By really just prioritizing those basics for a week, you might notice a substantial difference in how you feel. If we're not getting enough sleep, if we're not nourishing our body right, all the other processes become a lot harder. Our thinking becomes harder. It's harder for us to think our way out of a situation. We're more irritable, all the rest of it. So focus first on that. The second part, when you've got the basics down packed, is you can start to take a bird's eye view and do a little bit of an investigation to see if you can pinpoint what area you are actually feeling stuck in. And I'm saying stuck as if that's what you mean when you refer to a rut. So we can't intervene in a world that we cannot see. And again, it goes back to that feeling of a rut being overwhelming. It's a very general word. The more we can chunk it down and the more that we can actually find out where we're feeling stuck, the less overwhelming it will feel. For example, without knowing your situation, maybe that by tracking your thoughts for a few days, you start to notice that you are actually feeling really stuck when you get home from work, and a lot of your thoughts and your energy are stuck on what's going on at work. It could be that you're feeling stuck in a relationship or a family dynamic. Maybe there's something that needs communicating that's keeping you in a thought loop internally. It could be that there's just not enough things that you're incorporating into your life that make you feel good. Have you got something to look forward to? Asking some of these questions, getting a little bit more curious as to the context of the stuck feelings and where they're coming up the most and when they're coming up the most, can really make things feel more manageable, or at least isolated. So that's what I would do next. Getting curious as to where these feelings are coming from, where your thoughts are going. So we've got, first of all, upping the self-care and just prioritizing the basics. And then we've got thinking about what situation or what context this rut and stuckness is in. And then the final part, the third part, is really starting to get more specific and mapping out the patterns that are going on in the nervous system. When you have more awareness around your thoughts and the states in your body, you can really get in with some tools, real time, and start to shift the mind and the body into a better state. And this is the work that I do with my clients. We identify those specific thoughts that are coming up, that stuckness, and those stuck automated responses that the nervous system is currently producing. And then I give my clients some tools to interrupt that so that they can change the way that they are responding. And ultimately, these tools, or any tools you work with, you really want to help bring yourself back into the present so you're not getting stuck in these loops. So back to the nervous system states and looking at that in a bit more detail. So something I can give you today is just to help you understand what state your nervous system is mostly in when you are experiencing a rut. Without using all the fancy words, let's just refer to a shutdown state or a fight or flight state. So how do we know what state our nervous system is in? There's a few different, what's the word I'm looking for? A few different cues. Number one is we notice the words we're speaking and the language that's coming up. The other cue is how it shows up in the body through changes in our posture and in our breath. So I'll give you an example. The first one would be fight or flight. So when we're in a fight or flight response, our body is in the sympathetic state and we have thoughts like, this isn't going to work. I can't do this. There's not enough time. This is annoying. This feels overwhelming. If I don't do this, I'm going to lose it. So as you can notice, as I'm speaking, there's a lot of speed. I'm really heightened. It's showing up in the body as agitation, as frustration, as overwhelm. My breath is increased decreasing, my posture is more tense. So if you're in the middle of a rut and you start to notice that that is happening, all of those cues I've just mentioned, you would want to be focusing on using some down regulation exercises to help you move through that back into a place of safety and likely calmness and trust. And it's from that place that we're able to see more clearly and look at our different choices. So if we're in a fight or flight response, if we're slightly in a fight or flight response, we can really interrupt it by slowing down our breathing, especially having a longer exhalation. If you're feeling like you're more at the extreme end of the fight or flight response and there's a lot of energy coursing through your body, the best thing that you could do is actually mobilize that energy, go and lift weights, go to a boxing class, and then move from that place. Release some of the energy, and again, that will help you bring your body back into a state of balance. So the other state we can be in when we're in a rut is shutdown, and that's further down on our nervous system states. When we're in shutdown, it can feel like hopelessness, depressed, giving up, and the stories and the language around that are, I just can't, there's no point in doing this. You might feel really fatigued. And here, the cues in the body, here there can actually be a decreased heart rate and your metabolism can go into conservation mode. So it feels like everything's slower. You don't feel like you're in your body. This is a lot of how I felt after grief as well. It's just shut down and your body goes in to protect you. So here we really want to be building up small amounts of energy. So it might be something like going outside and feeling the sun on your face, holding something cold or doing a cold plunge. If you want to test the breath, it would actually be a small amount of a faster breath. So increasing the breath to really build that energy back up in your body. So these are the sorts of things that we can do to really get our nervous system in a state that's more useful. So if we bring this right back to the question around being in a rut, the chances are, I would guess, that you're spending more time in the state of fight or flight without realizing, or you're noticing your nervous system is in shutdown a lot. So if you have a sense of, oh, yep, I'm in fight or flight or I'm in shutdown, at least you know what state you're in. That is a start. And like I said, I do a lot of work with my clients around this. So if you want more tips or more tools, you're welcome to get in touch. A few other tips just to round it out. I would say that often the times I've felt in a rut, when I look back, I realize I'm not really listening to what my intuition is trying to tell me. This has been a huge one. And, we've all been in that situation where we sit on a decision for so long and we kind of, again, in that overwhelmed paralysis state, putting off a decision, putting off making a decision. What I've noticed is the more that I just make a choice, the more that I have made a decision, the faster I move through ruts. So just check in and ask yourself, is there something that I have been sitting on and not making a decision on, and therefore it's keeping me in this stuck state? And again, just check in. How am I living? Am I living in alignment with my values? Is there something here that feels completely off and I'm just not wanting to look at it? So keep that in mind and remember, like I said at the start, you will move through this. Give yourself lots of self-compassion, lots of patience, and one step at a time. Okay, next question comes from a beautiful friend of mine. What are you focused on at the moment? I think she may have asked me this question because I asked her the same question last week. But when thinking about this, there are a lot of things I am focusing on. There are a lot of things going on for me, but I will share some things that I think people will be able to connect with. So at the moment, probably not the answer you're expecting, but I am really prioritizing at the moment more fun, more ways to find pleasure in the small things, and to allow myself to let go and enjoy. Sounds really simple, but given the nature of my work, given the nature of building a business, the nature of grief, and just a lot of things, to be honest, I really lost that for a while. And I think a lot of us do. As we get older, responsibilities kick in. The older we get, sometimes the less fun we are. And what I've really been thinking about was that I can't do my work, I can't serve, I can't be inspired if I'm not incorporating joy and fun purposely into my days. I honestly think about my mum a lot. Well, I think about her every day, but I think about her in the sense that she was so light, she was so fun. Even through her darkest days, she always found a way to laugh on many days and to enjoy the moment. And I really admire people that can do that. So I've gone through phases in my life where I'm absolutely like that. And things seem to flow a lot more. So it's actually really about making sure that if you are into personal development, you're just balancing it with fun, with lightness, with letting yourself just be you, not taking life too seriously. I've really found myself nurturing myself and, in a way, reparenting myself in the last few years, which also means that I've had to show another level of care to myself when I could come up with all the excuses. I don't have enough money to do that. You don't have enough time to do that. So not only fun and play, but creating moments of nurture and pleasure day to day, whether it be in my space, lighting a candle, spending a little bit more effort and energy into my skincare routine, taking a bit more time and effort in the morning to look good and feel good. All of this stuff, I think, really can reflect the way that we feel about ourselves. So pleasure, joy, fun, coming back online, and just not taking life too seriously. Honestly, that that is what it is. I wish I could say something really inspirational, but I think that's what it comes down to for me at the moment. Another thing, letting go of needing to control, continuing to shed things, beliefs, thoughts, people that no longer serve me, and take action straight away rather than sitting on what if it goes wrong? What if this happens? No, make a decision and then take further action. And a lot of this for me really comes down to self acceptance, trusting myself and where I'm guided to go and what my intuition's telling me, and just acting on it rather than making decisions out of fear, just making decisions out of trust. I had this moment last year where I really put my trust in life to the test. I've had many instances where I've lost trust in life, but there is an underlying current that somewhere the universe has my back. Like deep down, I I I believe that the universe has all of our backs. So last year I got to this point where I just really wasn't. I just knew I shouldn't be based in Christchurch. After I got back from Bali the first time, I knew that I needed to move, and I'd been sitting on that decision for a little bit until it got to the point where I'm like, no, I'm taking action. I didn't know what my next step was. This is where trust comes into play. I packed up all of my stuff. I booked a ticket back to Bali, did some work over there for a month, not knowing what my next step was. Now, for some people, this would sound absolutely crazy. But what I've really learned in the last few years is we have to take steps into uncomfortableness. We have to take steps into the unknown. And I had to get out of my own way. And the only way that I knew I would make change is if I jumped. So I did that, not knowing where I'd come back to, not knowing my next step. I think so much of us try and control everything around us because it makes us feel safe, but really it's a bit of an illusion. So I went to Bali, and funnily enough, as soon as I got to Bali, these opportunities came up in Auckland around a living situation and also around a work situation, a work opportunity. So that was me taking and listening to my nudges, taking a jump, and then the next thing popping up in front of me. When I got back to New Zealand, I found my way up to Auckland, and since then I have stayed here and more opportunities have come up. Again, in the past, I would have really sat with stuckness and fear for a lot longer than what I do now. And I think this is just a reminder to just let go of control, let go of having to have it all figured out, knowing when it's all going to happen, and just take a step with the intention, take an action step towards where you want to head and meet the universe halfway, essentially. I used to be so hyper fixated on controlling situations, and really my sense of safety came through a lot of things external to myself. But the older I've got, the more I've navigated through, I know that ultimately I am my sense of safety. So I'm forever working on this. Like I said, it's still a work in progress for me, really jumping on what my intuition says and taking action. So I think, again, the thing I'm working on is just continuing to build that self-trust, to let go of having all the answers, to take a step forward and continue trusting in my path. Finally, the last thing, I guess, is I'm working on building connections. I have been in a place, like many of us, after COVID, after navigating, some really difficult years where I just wanted to isolate. I feel like I hadn't really built a lot of connections. And so my priority at the moment is putting myself in more places where I can form these connections. Because again, it's about intention and aligned action. So getting out to work, networking, just all sorts of things, doing new activities. And I think so many of us can feel so disconnected and complain about it, but we don't do anything to really put ourselves out there to be in the position where we might meet new people. So I hope this is resonating. I hope this is a little gentle reminder for somebody that needs it. Okay, question 3. I'm new to your page. How did you overcome your pain? I've had ongoing headaches for 2 years and it's really hard. First of all, I'm really sorry to hear that. Yes, any form of chronic pain is very difficult to deal with. I would also say that there's no one way of getting well. There's no perfect way. Everyone's journey looks different. I'll share a bit about mine. I really recommend going back to I think it was episode 2, where I shared my journey. But before I even got well, before I even started taking action, there are a few things that I had to do to shift chronic pain. So the first thing I had to do was to believe it was possible, because for so long, for years, I was told it wasn't possible to get well and it wasn't possible to get rid of this pain. So of course I started to believe that. So I really had to look at where my beliefs were at and how they were having an impact on my reality. I had to read success stories. I had to research neuroplasticity, the mind-body connection, to start to believe that change was possible. I started to become more aware of the language that I was using and the fact that a lot of the pain that I was experiencing, there was a huge fear component. I really had to stop. I got to the point where I had to stop looking for a pill, because at that point, no pill had helped me. I had to stop looking for a perfect diet, because again, at that point, I tried all the supplements, all the diets, and I really had to get to this crossroad where I had to let go of looking for answers outside of me. That was the first point. And I really zone in on this because this is most of the work. It's taking this everything, I'll find that the thing outside of me to, if I have the right tools, I can influence my own health. It's a huge perspective shift. The next thing I did was I did some counseling to address previous traumas. I did hypnotherapy and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And that's when I started to explore what was actually happening for me when I first got ill. It's when I started to understand the mind-body connection more and just started again opening up to the fact that perhaps my nervous system had been working on overdrive for quite a long time, and that was impacting my health. So at this point, I was open to the mind-body connection. I went and did a 3-day training called the Lightning Process, which is what I now teach. And that completely transformed my life. What I learned on this training was that chronic pain lasting for longer than 3 to 6 months, is processed in the brain. It's a lot more complex than just looking at what is going on in the location that you're experiencing pain. And I learned tools to retrain my brain for it to respond more appropriately. And in that sense, I was shifting the message that my brain sent my nervous system to put my nervous system back into a calm, regulated state so it could heal. Basically within a month of doing this training, I can and applying the tools consistently, because it is like going to the gym for the brain, I had a complete reduction in chronic pain to the point where I wasn't experiencing it anymore. I did have I wouldn't say a relapse, I'd say a blip about a year later, and I was experiencing a few weeks of chronic pain. And at that point, I started doing EFT, which is called Emotional Freedom Technique. You can actually look that up on YouTube, it is free. I did some more body work and kept up my brain retraining tools, and then again, the pain shifted. Now, I am saying this very casually, but I can tell you that I used to experience a lot of pain. I had tried everything under the sun to shift this pain, many appointments, many medications. There were times where I would be in so much pain, I honestly thought I'd have to call an ambulance. It was a really difficult period. But since 2014, 15, I have never since experienced chronic pain. So I am an advocate for mind-body healing and mind-body approaches. Of course, different things work for different people. One other thing I will say, I had to really address the way I was showing up. I noticed it with myself. I now notice it with my clients a lot. Perfectionism, people-pleasing, high achieving, they are all coping mechanisms that we learn that really keep our body in a stress response. So for me to get well, I also had to shift the way I was showing up day to day. I had to start implementing more boundaries. I had to be kinder to myself. I really had to look at a lot of things internally. And that's what I believe. For sustainable change, it takes a really holistic approach. Further down the track, I began to practice yoga. I started to understand my breath and how to breathe efficiently. Sometimes I still slip into old patterns, but I've come a long way. What else? One more tip as well is that to really move through and get to the other side of chronic pain, I had to really focus on the energy that was behind my healing. I had to take a different approach than striving to constantly think of the next thing outside of me that might work. And I had to really let go and trust the process, apply the tools I knew that would take time, apply compassion, apply patience, and eventually my nervous system started responding. This doesn't always look like a linear journey. Often it's a very up and down journey. But I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm also happy to jump on a Zoom call and explain my story in a few more details, if that helps. Good luck on your healing journey. You will get there. Okay, last question for today, guys. I can't seem to lose weight. Do you think this could be a nervous system thing? I'm not overeating and it's frustrating. Thank you for this question. This is a really interesting question. And I would absolutely say yes. High cortisol, which is a stress hormone, high cortisol can mean that your body can hold on to stores of fat if your brain thinks you're in danger. It wants your body to maintain calories and fat to fight off the threat and to keep warm. So it makes a lot of sense at that primitive level. And what can happen is if you've got high levels of cortisol moving through your bloodstream, the hormone can increase your appetite, and that can cause insulin resistance and then slow down your metabolism. So there's a lot of factors at play. So what can you do about this? So the first thing is, I would say, go get all your tests done, get routine checks, just so you can, rule anything out. A nutritionist can be quite helpful as well, just to make sure that your diet is one that will suit your body type and where you're currently at in life. And the same goes for exercise, making sure that you're working with someone that knows their stuff in that area. But what I would say is just exploring your daily routines first and how you approach life mentally, making sure that you can do your best to get your body into a parasympathetic state so those stress hormones can lower. So focus on the simple things that you can do to implement, like really your circadian health. So making sure you're getting sunlight early in the morning, no phone before you sleep, Again, focusing on that good nutrition, making sure you get good nutrition to support your gut health and to balance your blood sugars. So often, despite the diet, I know there's lots of diets out there, but I would say one that's full of variety, more protein. And when you are eating, just focusing on eating mindfully, eating when you're sitting down, when you're rested, and that can really help. The other thing I'd say is, are you eating enough? Because sometimes when we're not eating enough, we don't realize. And in the same sense, our body can go into starvation mode and hold on to fat and different stores. So are you eating enough? That kind of goes back to that nutritionist, just making sure everything there is where it should be at. Exercise, definitely listen to the last, or I think it was episode 11, where I talked to Nathan McGregor. That would be really beneficial because we do want to be changing our movement based on the phase of life we are at. And if you find yourself moving through a stressful period, or you have been in chronic stress for a long period of time, definitely prioritizing things like weights, yoga, walking will be really good to bring the body back into a parasympathetic state rather than focusing on HIIT classes and that kind of thing. I'm not sure what you're doing in that area, but something to consider. Okay, so the next thing, if your stress hormones are elevated and we want to bring our body into this state of balance as much as possible so they can come down, you want to also focus on the relationship you have with yourself. How can you bring yourself back to a place of safety and calm? Something to consider is, what is the energy you have towards your body? Are you focused on what it's not doing for you or what it is doing for you? And I know this sounds simple, but we really have to get back into a state of gratitude, really seeing the things that we either like about our body or what is working functionally well. Starting to track those thoughts, because if you are constantly having negative self-talk, it can really spike the stress hormones in the body and inadvertently stop you from shedding that fat. So come and see me at the Lightning Process. I do a lot of work around that. But yeah, just starting to track your thoughts towards your body. Where can you give it some credit? Where can you start to show gratitude for it? We can't heal in a body that we hate. And it's the same with it working for us. It's going to be a lot harder for it to work for us if we're constantly saying negative things to it. Another thing to check in is, what is your relationship to productivity? If you're constantly feeling like you're not doing enough or you can't rest, that may be keeping your body in a stress response where it's not in a state to shift the weight. And another thing to consider, do you have any traumas from the past that have kept your body in this state to protect you? Honestly, I know this sounds quite interesting, but unconsciously there are parts that can respond as an attempt to keep us safe. So stubborn fat can actually be almost a shield. It's an unconscious thing. It's not something we choose. But for individuals who have experienced a traumatic event, often some kind of abuse, what can happen sometimes is their weight helps them create a barrier to the outside world. And this is where a lot of our emotions and our trauma can come into the way that our physiology and our body is working. So the positive is that you can actually shift some of this, but it's not something that a lot of people consider when they're thinking about weight loss and how to shift stubborn weight. But traumas from the past can keep our body in hypervigilance, and there are always parts of us that can go in to protect us long term. So if you're resonating with this, feel free to again reach out and I'll give you some more resources where you can start to look into that further. So to wrap up this question, yes, absolutely. If we are in a long-term stress response, if our nervous system has become dysregulated over time, fat loss is definitely, or weight loss is definitely something that we can struggle with. I know there's so many more factors involved and it can be a lot more complex, but really looking at our routines day to day and where we can shift our body back into this parasympathetic, calm, regulated state can really help. Looking at the food we're eating, the exercise and movement we're doing, of course, things like sleep, but also the relationship we have with ourselves, how we're talking to ourselves and addressing any previous traumas can help get that body back into a state where it is able to shift more easily. So they are are our questions for today, guys. I hope that you took something from one of these questions. This has gone on way longer than I expected. I said it was going to be a short and sweet episode. But yeah, a lot of things to think about. If you do have a question yourself, you're more than welcome to reach out on Instagram. And please continue to like, follow, and subscribe so that everyone that is interested in these topics can listen in and I can share more wisdom and get this podcast out there. I also have some workshops coming up. I will be posting on Instagram, so make sure you're following at neuro.spark on Instagram. And for the ladies, I also have a little side account called Loving on Herself. That is the Instagram handle. On there, I'm just sharing more around my journey, embracing my femininity, communication, relationships, women's health, and just playing around with a few concepts there. So if you're interested in that, please follow along and I will accept you into that page. I hope you all have a beautiful week ahead and I look forward to having you on the next episode.